President Trump has reached a record before the 100 days, and it is a record of complete measurable failure. Many of his own advisors and Wall Street allies view it as humiliating. It is something that will not only affect so many people in our country and around the world, but even if you look at it by narrow terms of just the president's record in history, this is now the blemish on his record, not only for the second term, but forever. The record is the self-inflicted choice to wipe out this much value in the stock market over just 2 days. We've been reporting how people are holding onto their hats during this tariff-inflicted meltdown over the last day. Well, tonight, as we end the week and have a whole nother day of markets, the U.S. stock market has now lost $6.4 trillion in just 2 days. This is Trump's trade war. We are losing because of Trump, because of the choices he's made. The market's tanking. Recession fears deepening. And, of course, it's the economy stupid. This is not something the Republican Party will be able to lie out of or to pardon their way out of or to trick people into thinking that all of the problems they have, from rising prices to job fears to rising costs, that they're not real or they're somebody else's fault. We're also seeing the fear of an anti-Trump, anti-MAGA political backlash as people start to see this candidate who promised to focus on your concerns in the economy has actually, according to many, sold out the American worker.
Markets look set to sell off as Donald Trump imposes the steepest U.S. import levies in a century.
Stocks set to wipe out nearly $2 trillion in market value.
Taking a plunge as investors react to the sweeping tariffs.
Right now, angry heads are prevailing, and right now circumstances are prevailing that send stock prices much lower than where they are right now.
I struggle for what the president's game plan is. Because if you wanted to make the market crash, I think you would go with this game plan.
I haven't seen it yet. I guess it's close to panic.
This is the biggest policy mistake in 95 years.
95 years, and we can show you the top 500 companies. These are the largest companies that trade, and whether you trade in the stock market or not, as I've told you, this will affect you because these type of losses come with consequences and eventually job cuts and, of course, the price and inflation issues. This is down another 6% today. Another market index you heard of, the Dow, shed over 5%. The NASDAQ, another big bucket of stocks, losing just about 6%. This is what they call an official bear market, where you are down a fifth from the peak. Trillions gone. The Fed now warning Trump's tariffs will juice inflation. Remember, that was the big issue, the high prices that helped him over the understandable concern with inflation and the way people blamed then President Biden. Well, Donald Trump's serving up more inflation. That's according to the Fed, which is the independent arm of monetary policy for the federal government, and, of course, the risk of recession or slower growth. One of the top banks, J.P. Morgan, says we have tipped over to a recession now being more likely than not, 60%. That is, based on all the modules they have, it is more likely than not that Trump's choice to do these tariffs will give us a recession that otherwise was less likely. Indeed, before Trump came into office, though, same banks were putting the recession fears much lower, like 20%. The Financial Times, which is sort of the British version of the Wall Street Journal as a Bible for the market, says this is an astonishing act of self-harm by Donald Trump. Then their counterpart that I mentioned in the U.S., Rupert Murdoch's Wall Street Journal, quote, someone should sue to block his abuse of power. The Journal, now suddenly concerned about Trump lawlessness, something they have often minimized on other topics. China is hitting back, and boy, do they have the resources and the runway to do it. They're matching the whopping 30% tariff. Economics can be complicated, but this part is simple. I will tell you, America, if I can speak directly with you, you will be paying that tariff. That's exactly how it works, which is exactly why so many people, apart from our divided political times and partisan lenses, so many people, from nonpartisan experts to liberals who warned against this, to Republicans who privately warned against this, although they didn't use any power to try to stop Trump, to Wall Street experts, to, of course, economists explain, a third, 34% spike, and you're going to pay it, because that's what Donald Trump decided for you. Welcome to Donald Trump's America and his economics. Now, on the politics side, Republicans, late, quietly, with a shuffle step, are starting to see how this could doom their party for even more than one election. Tariffs are upsetting the entire world economy. There's political peril for the party that brought them, and take one of the Republicans who for years has backed Donald Trump ever since they made a power pact when Trump became president the first time, but now a new tune from Ted Cruz.
If the result is our trading partners jack up their tariffs and we have high tariffs everywhere, I think that is a bad outcome for America. Tariffs are a tax on consumers, and I'm not a fan of jacking up taxes on American consumers. So my hope is these tariffs are short-lived.
Hope all you want. We are in deep. We've lost trillions. Even if Donald Trump can see the failure, can hear the markets and the television coverage and the press coverage savagely noting the savage pain that he's brought to the United States, to consumers, to workers, as well as the rest of the world, that doesn't mean he has known to adjust after going this big and this deep. Other conservatives now admitting the problem.
I'm not going to bubble wrap it. What's happening is not good.
The same people that voted for you to play by the rules, put away money for taxes, put money away for retirement, are really feeling the brunt of collateral damage of this.
Look, I hate tariffs. I think they're stupid. I think they're backwards. I don't think that they help the American economy. The president has a different opinion.
I'm certainly concerned about what's happening right now in the markets, and I hope the administration is looking at that as well.
It's hard to find a Republican who's willing to do an interview and wants to defend this stuff, which tells you the free fall. Remember, there's been a lot of talk about the trade war and a lot of bluster and some stops and starts, which we covered, but this is now the red-hot core of it. These are these first 2 days when it hit this level with these global tariffs and the pain. And in these 2 days, Republicans starting to admit they have a Trump problem. Many of the people you just saw on your screen, they cater to a base that likes Donald Trump and identifies as MAGA, but there are even limits there because they can see that they could lose their jobs, their perch, their audience, in the case of some of those commentators, because people are paying this pain. When I show you bear market 20% crash territory, after that will come the firings and the job losses. Now, most of the elected Republicans, though, are not yet even trying to use the power they actually have. They can do interviews, but they actually have power in Congress. There's been this push for a Senate bill that would better control and limit Donald Trump's tariff instincts. Most Republicans haven't supported that. A handful did. Meanwhile, business owners are feeling it.
Experts predict prices across the board, including appliances, clothing, groceries, and cars, are expected to go up.
I'm a little afraid that the price will be going up, which means a higher car payment with me, and I have 2 little kids, so that's going to be a little hard for me, too.
As a small business, we can't absorb that kind of increase in product. So we're having to reprice.
In one word, how you're feeling about what's happening in the stock market right now?
Anxious? Yeah. I mean, it's not too clear what's going to happen.
Terrified.
Why terrified?
Vulnerable people were always unsafe, and now they're made even more vulnerable.
And that's just a couple days in. There's also resistance. Protesters against the Trump-Musk agenda, as well as this economic pain, say that they have, and you can see the bullets here from this group, Hands Off, they have now confirmed protests, often more than one, in every state in the country this weekend. So the chaos is real. The pain is real. And Donald Trump basically walked off the job. Think about this level of economic calamity. When COVID hit and you had the crash, it was everyone's focus. If you go back to another crash that was not caused by U.S. policy or a president saying he didn't care, but rather the sort of complex real estate bubble that burst in 2008, well, everybody was on the job, and Bush was convening meetings with the leaders of the economy, the banks that were so at fault for some of it, and the congressional leadership to figure out every single thing that could be on the table that they could act with all deliberate emergency speed. This is a president who claims emergency powers and wartime powers when there isn't a war, and then walks off the job right now today when we're in this emergency shedding $6 trillion. He went to Mar-a-Lago. He's scheduled to do a weekend golf tour. So he left work early for that, left the White House, wasn't physically on site to deal with any of the type of meetings I mentioned that Bush did, or talk to people in Congress, or anything to even try to quiet the markets and show leadership. He's driving around his golf cart and also making money because it's his private business that's hosting the Saudi event. Markets may burn, but he's counting up his own money, just as I told you. He took a lot of crypto money and thought, oh, as long as he's doing okay, forget everyone else. If he lost $6 trillion, which he doesn't have, I think we would hear a very different tune, and he might even have time to go to work instead of ride around the cart. Now, how is this playing out in MAGA land? I showed you the leadership. We heard from Republicans who are running away, but you got to understand, one of the great political strengths of Donald Trump is the overestimation of his support. I'm sure you watch the news if you're hearing me, and there's been many, many reports and examples of folks who stand by him no matter what, or reverse themselves for him, or come back to him even after doubts. But then you also have to remember, he got fewer votes in 16. He got fewer votes in 20. He blew the midterms in 18. He remains one of the most polarizing and unpopular figures, and then even the base that he does have doesn't stand by him for everything, and certainly not something like this. We began by showing you some of those Republicans who are worried about how many of their supporters, even in red districts, are upset at this self-inflicted economic calamity. That's what it sounds like when your leader lies, ignores all advice, starts an economic global calamity, and costs you a ton of money.
Yeah, Joe, look, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. We can spend a lot of time, kind of like who lost Vietnam, we can spend a lot of time debating what happened in the 90s and the early 2000s and how we ended up with a much larger trade deficit and many fewer manufacturing jobs. But what's done is done, and now we are where we are, and the question is, where do we go from here? And the market's answer very clearly is we don't go in this direction, that this is not going to be productive. It is simply going to hurt our economy. So let's take a look at a couple of those numbers. Let's start with the stock market yesterday. We talked about the almost 5% drop. This is actually $5 trillion of wealth lost since the inauguration. The stock market had already been starting to go down as people got more and more nervous about what Trump was or wasn't going to do. So a huge drop. But here's what's actually quite interesting. The stock market drop here was actually larger than the stock market drop in every other major index, every other major country. In Japan, it was down 2.8%. In Europe, it was down 2.6%. In the UK, just 1.6%, and in China, just 0.6%. So why is that? Trump thinks he's hurting all these people. He thinks everything is, a negotiation where somebody wins and somebody loses, and he thought he was the winner, and we turned out to be the loser. And the answer is because, based on a set of projections from the budget lab up in New Haven, we are the loser. The impact of this, the long-run impact on GDP of this, is actually going to be, projected anyway, to be worst on the U.S. of any other major country that we trade with, except for Canada. Canada has a special problem. They export a lot of oil to us. We are net oil exporters, but we do bring in some Canadian oil for complicated reasons I'll spare you. But essentially, they believe that we will have the worst economic impact. What actually could be positive in the UK, Trump's tariffs on the UK are only 10% of among the lowest. The EU, a tenth of a percent, Mexico, a tenth, and so on. And China, only negative 0.2, because these countries have other things they can do. Their consumers are not going to be paying the cost of these tariffs because they're on the other side of it, and therefore they are actually going to have slightly better economies than they would have had. So the irony is we're the worst. And yes, in terms of that JP Morgan projection, I think we are definitely in the 50%, 60% recession odds for this year. This economy is going to soften materially.
Yeah, Goldman Sachs bumped up their probability of a recession as well. Had been a long shot about a week ago, not so much now. Let's move to your second chart, Steve, putting this into some historical perspective. Yes, Democrats in the past have advocated for tariffs, targeted tariffs. Joe Biden had them in place as recently as a few months ago. But we've never seen anything quite like this.
No, we haven't, Willie. And so since we're talking in history, well, I'll just start there a little bit. And you can see back in 1980, tariffs have been coming down for a long time, since World War II. But you can see in 1980, we have, a meaningful tariff rate. But then this is what Joe was talking about. All the trade agreements brought our tariff rate down, down, down to just around 2%. This circle is Trump-Biden. You can see Trump did some tariffs in his first term. Tariff rate went up a little bit. This is, for all of his talk in the first term, this is all that happened. Biden brought them down part way, and now we have this. And this, going across here, this is 1909. The last time we had tariffs at this level was in 1909. Now, many of us studied in school about the recession and about how we put tariffs on. Some say that it caused the recession. It didn't, but it exacerbated the recession. The famous Smoot-Hawley tariffs. That tariff rate here was actually a little under 20%. So these are not only the highest tariff rates we've had in more than a century, but higher than we had when we had what every historian would tell you were the worst tariffs we've ever put in place until now. So let's turn to some of the individual impacts, because obviously the market goes down, but all the other stocks do different things. And so we had a fairly disparate impact. And there are good reasons, and I'm not going to go through all these, but I'll give you a couple of examples. Nike down 14%. All of, I shouldn't say all, probably virtually all of their clothing and their shoes and their sneakers and so forth are made in Southeast Asia, which have some of the highest tariff rates, as we'll talk about in a minute. Boeing is a huge exporter of planes to other countries. Those countries can now buy Airbuses. Could be really bad for Boeing's business. Apple makes virtually every iPhone that they sell in China. 54% tariff coming into effect there. Amazon, you would be surprised at how many packages you order from Amazon that are actually shipped directly to you from somewhere overseas where they're made, and a high tariff will now be paid. J.P. Morgan, the banks could be facing pressure for another reason, and so on and so forth. I'll just mention quickly down here, Walmart and Costco. Why did they do comparatively well? Because they have such buying power that they are likely to be able to hold down their price increases and take market share from other retailers.
All right, let's move to your last chart, Steve, and it's time for a little math, because the Trump administration has been selling some of the numbers he put up as tariffs that these other countries, including allies, have placed on us, when really it's just kind of a trade deficit that they used funky math to come up with. So help our viewers understand the numbers that the administration is presenting.
Well, I'm going to do my best to help, but their math would not get them through math class either. The economics wouldn't get through economics class. The math isn't going to get through math class. But let's talk about what they did. So first of all, just to put some stark numbers next to it, you can see these are our top trading partners. And what the tariff rates are going to be. European 20%. China is actually now 54% because he added 20% earlier in the year, so that gets up to 54. Japan 24, South Korea 25. Taiwan 32. You'll notice China, Mexico, and Canada are not on here because he did separate deals with them also, and they will pay some tariffs, but he does have that trade agreement he negotiated with them before. But one of the points I want to make is that some of the highest tariff rates, the way he did this, and I'll explain that in just 1 second, some of the highest tariff rates are under some of the poorest, most struggling countries in the world. And so Bangladesh is now going to pay a 37% tariff rate on stuff they sell to us. South Africa, 30%, and so on. So this is going to cut our purchases from these countries dramatically. It is going to hurt these countries' economies dramatically. It is not just bad economics, it's bad foreign policy, and it's inhumane. So you ask, how do they calculate it? I'm sure everybody has seen this formula before. I'm joking. And I'm not going to go through it all, but we got a lot of Greek letters here. We got epsilon, we got phi, we got all this stuff. But basically, Willie, it comes down to what you just said. The way they think about this, they think that if there is a trade deficit, then by definition, the other country is manipulating trade, and therefore they have to they calculate the tariff based on the size of the trade deficit relative to how much they send us. So the bigger the trade deficit relative to what they send us, the higher the tariffs. It makes no sense. It doesn't. It's not. You're not going to find an economics professor on the planet who's going to tell you this is the right way to look at it. But it's emblematic of the whole mess they've created.
Well, and that thing to your right makes no sense to me. In fact, it scares me greatly. Please, let's not talk about it again. Math formulas. Ugh. Steve Rattner, thank you so much for being with us. We always appreciate it. And you can hear Steve talk about the impact of Donald Trump's tariffs in the latest episode on New York Times podcast. The opinions are, of course, you can watch these segments on YouTube. I mean, we're finding out these Rattner's segments on YouTube. Willie, sometimes 1 million views. Like this guy, he's sort of, it's like what Justin Bieber was doing at the beginning of his career. This kid Rattner has a future. So,
Ron, let's talk about China's 34% retaliation. The president posted this morning saying China panicked. How does China's move impact where this trade war goes next? Do we know?
We have some idea, although the president suggested late yesterday that if anyone offered a phenomenal deal, he would negotiate the tariffs away.
As in
that
TikTok?
really didn't do much to it. As in TikTok, if we got a deal on TikTok, Amazon reportedly and others were interested in buying it from the Chinese company ByteDance. But Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, yesterday also said no country should retaliate, which was in some ways a veiled threat that our tariffs or import taxes could go up. So it's hard to see what the end game is here, Chris. There's quite frankly no rationale, no economic rationale for the way this has been put into place. It could be potentially damaging beyond what we currently consider if it goes into, as I said earlier, a full-blown trade war. But if China is going to retaliate, we could see retaliation from Japan, South Korea, possibly Taiwan, which would be unusual given that we are allies with them. And depending on what happens ultimately with Canada and Mexico, further retaliation there as well. So don't know the end game. Not quite sure what the point of this is, although the president has said several things. Number one, he would like to replace ultimately certain taxes with import taxes. He would like to raise revenue to finance tax cuts. Kind of hard to do that. It's not really compatible. This is a massive tax on the American people and certainly on American business.
I'm just hearing in my ear the Dow is down more than 1,700 points. That would be the highest level of drop, the biggest drop since these tariffs were announced, now down 1,713, 14, 22, 25. I'm going to stop looking at that right now. Let me ask you about this, Congressman, and drive this home for people. A guy named Dan Ives, he's an analyst for Wedbush Securities, released a post calling this economic Armageddon. And here's what he wrote. 50% China tariffs, 23% Taiwan tariffs would essentially cause a shutoff valve from U.S. tech landscape and in the process cause every electronic to go up 40 or 50% for consumers. iPhones in the U.S., made in the U.S., would cost $3,500 compared to $1,000 now. The stock market, as we know, is not the economy, but if prices go up anywhere near that amount, can the Republicans message their way out of this?
No, they can't. This is simply a massive tax increase by any measure. The tariff is a tax. And what did we not learn from Smoot-Hawley of 1930? These tariffs are going to reduce imports. There's no question about that. But it will also lead to a contraction of the economy. During the Great Depression, you know what? We ran trade surpluses, but did anybody care when we had 20% unemployment? No, they didn't. It was a mistake. And everybody acknowledges it. So why are we doing it again? This is not only dumb, but it is destructive. And then we got this piece of paper from the administration saying, calculating these rates that aren't even based on what the other countries are tariffing us at. So this makes no sense at all. Republicans in Congress should reclaim their Article 1 authority and insist. And they could pass a bill that would say that the president could not impose any tariffs in the name of national security or national emergencies without the vote of the U.S. Congress. That's how they need to reclaim this authority. They have to push back because this is going to cost them in the elections.
So, Ron, I also want to ask you about something else the president posted today. He said this would be, I'm quoting here, a perfect time for Fed Chair Jerome Powell to cut interest rates. And here's what Powell said today.
It's a good time to take a step back and let things clarify. That's why it's just too soon to say what the appropriate monetary policy response will be to these new policies. It is just too soon to say. We can't say with any confidence today. We're watching to see what the policies turn out to be and the ways in which they will affect the economy, and then we'll be able to act.
Maybe you heard it differently, but Ron, it doesn't sound to me like Powell is in any hurry to act.
He admitted that he's in no rush, and he said some other things as well, which was that the Federal Reserve has to analyze which event would be bigger for them with respect to their dual mandate. They're supposed to maintain maximum sustainable employment and also stable prices. So if inflation were the bigger worry and ran away to the upside because of the import taxes, the Fed would focus on inflation, which would mean raising interest rates potentially. If there were more jobs lost and a greater possibility of recession deepening, the Fed would be inclined to cut interest rates. Now, the market's making bets that the Fed may cut as many as 3 to 5 times this year. They may be a little over their skis, but it really depends on how these import taxes affect the economy overall. And so he's threading a needle here. He's not, and he admitted that he would not comment on any publicly elected officials' statements. The president has been trying to push the Fed to lower interest rates since he's gotten into office. They've done it, obviously since a little bit since last June, but they're on pause right now, waiting to see the effects of this. I mean, most of us, I think, assume a recession is going to be a more powerful input than inflation, but we'll have to wait and see, as the Fed chair said, and they're just not in a rush to make a precipitous move here.
Ron, when we came on the air, we were down 1,600. We're now 1,850. It's gone up almost 100 points since you started talking. What's happening?
Yeah. I'm not sure. I haven't seen it. It's hard to see, any headlines that have come across.
Watch this. Are you able to watch this, Ron? It just keeps going up.
No, I'm staring right at the screen.
Okay.
Yeah. We're getting hammered here. And the NASDAQ and the S&P are also down around 5%. The NASDAQ's in a bear market mode right now. So is the very small stock Russell 2000. They're both down 20% from their most recent highs. So this is a type of cascading sell-off you don't like to see as it gathers momentum moving into the close of the day. Could set up a very difficult Monday. We've had what I would characterize already as a mini crash in the market, and something larger could be in the future. But until we get clarity around the president's policies here, these markets are going to be somewhat unstable, to say the very least.
I think I said up instead of down. I think I was wishfully thinking there. The Dow now down 1,862 points. I spilled a cup of coffee this morning, and I knew that we were going to do coffee prices. I was like, Anyway, back to the serious stuff, Congressman, and this is serious. The White House has official talking points. This is not a negotiation, but then the president said the opposite.
Every country's called us. That's the beauty of what we do. We put ourselves in the driver's seat. If we would have asked some of these countries, almost most of these countries, to do us a favor, they would have said no. Now they'll do anything for us.
But are you open to deals with these countries if they're calling you?
Well, it depends. If somebody said that we're going to give you something that's so phenomenal, as long as they're giving us something that's good.
Something phenomenal. In fact, Congressman, he apparently spoke to the leader of Vietnam this morning. What do you think would have to happen for the president to be able to claim a win and maybe change course?
Well, if the economy keeps tanking or the market keeps tumbling and tanking as it is, and if this economy does go into recession, which is looking more and more likely, unfortunately, maybe that will force the president to course correct. But what is so dispiriting about this whole situation is that it just seems the president has declared this preemptive trade war against our partners and allies. On what planet does anyone think that declaring a trade war with Canada and Mexico, our key North American partners, and with the European Union, which invests heavily into the United States, why do we think we won't be hurt by this? and then to accuse everybody in the world of being a bunch of rip-off artists or stealing from us. You know, when the farmer in Nebraska buys potash from Canada, they're doing it voluntarily and for a good reason. Then that farmer from Nebraska sells his corn to the Mexicans who are buying it for a good reason. Nobody's stealing from anybody here. And the president keeps saying this. It's crazy. Why are we fighting with the South Koreans and the Japanese and the Australians? We need these people. They've been good partners. And we're just basically liberating ourselves from our allies, our partners, and lower prices. So I'm just like, I just want to throw my hands in the air and say this is so unnecessary and so self-destructive.
So, Yamiche, we talked at the top about the split screen, and it really is extraordinary. You have people across the country losing their long-saved retirement money, worried about the price of groceries, worried about the price of everything, while the president, a billionaire, is playing golf and hosting a candlelight dinner at his resort. Have you heard anything from White House officials, any concern about how this looks to the American people?
Well, Chris, it's a key question, but President Trump and White House officials do not seem concerned by this split screen. And in fact, they continue to say that the president laid out his plan during the election when he was running for office and running for re-election. And he told voters exactly what he wanted to do. And those same voters that were across a number of economic situations backed this. And we, of course, have some voters who are now regretting that decision. But you also have some Trump supporters who say, look, I trust the president. He's been saying to the American people there's going to be some pain. People should brace themselves for short-term pain. Whether or not this is actually going to be short-term pain or longer-term pain is, of course, a big question here. But the president is not seeming concerned by this. And if you look on his Truth Social, as he is going after Fed Chair Jerome Powell and pushing him to cut interest rates, he's also posting pictures of himself and others playing golf, gathering at different golf events, and talking about Tiger Woods, of course, that being the nationally recognized golf champion in our country. So there's a lot of sort of doubling down on the fact that he feels like he can do both of these things. He feels like continue to do the job not only half, but a number of times from Florida, because he's gone almost every weekend to Florida and gone golfing almost every weekend of his presidency. But the president really does feel like this is what the American people voted for. And of course, we're going to continue to ask whether or not this is still what people want to see happening. But I don't see any concern here for the president feeling like he feels like he's out of touch, or that he's feeling like people who are struggling are going to be angry at the fact that he's golfing, Chris.
So in the course of this segment, the Dow up probably around 250 points, and as it approaches down 2,000. We haven't seen those numbers since the pandemic in 2020. The Dow right now down 1,926 points. Yamiche Alcindor, Run Insana, former Congressman Charlie Dent, thank you.
I am not a fan of tariffs. If the result is our trading partners jack up their tariffs and we have high tariffs everywhere, I think that is a bad outcome for America. Tariffs are a tax on consumers, and I'm not a fan of jacking up taxes on American consumers. So my hope is these tariffs are short-lived and they serve as leverage to lower tariffs across the globe.
That is his hope. Republicans on the Hill are uncomfortable, as you can see, as Donald Trump's tariffs continue to anger our trade partners and send the markets into a tailspin. But are they uncomfortable enough to actually do anything to rein the president in? Joining us now, Democratic Senator Amy Klobuchar, who represents the state of Minnesota. She's also the ranking member of the Senate Committee on Agriculture. Good to have you.
Thanks, Katie. I was thinking the same thing as I heard Ted Cruz's dramatic words. He actually has an opportunity tonight to put himself right there and join me in supporting the amendment that Senator Schumer is introducing that basically says if these tariffs have caused the price of goods, household goods, grocery goods, lumber to go up, then they should be rescinded back to January, with the exception of countries like North Korea and Iran and the like. That is a really good way to basically put in this Republican budget, which has all kinds of problems, a provision that would allow these tariffs to be rescinded. So there's no place better than now to not just talk the talk, but actually stand up to this president who believes he's a king. It's not a kingdom around here, Katie. They are not the subjects to the king, as 4 of them showed with the bill that Senator Kaine and I, the resolution that we put on the floor just 2 days ago. 4 of them stood up with us on the Canadian tariffs, and we won. This is their moment. They can actually do something about it.
So you did do that. It has to go to the House, and the House is still staunchly on the Republican side. Do you foresee a point, maybe with the markets going down even farther, where he loses that support, not just in the Senate, but in the House, and perhaps by enough of a margin to override a veto?
And, you know, if we have more headlines like this in the Wall Street Journal, and you've seen already trillions and trillions of dollars that have been lost in the stock market and people's retirement savings. I appreciate the words of Wall Street traders of how devastating this is, but to take it from Wall Street to Main Street, this is a $4,000 tax on every American family. It adds $20,000 to a price of a new home for a young person. It adds $3,000 to the price of a car. So I do believe, first of all, you got people in the middle. I know them. They voted for me and Donald Trump in Minnesota in the last election. They simply wanted him to do something different on costs and bring inflation down. His policies are having the opposite effect. So, yes, I do think we're going to see change once people see that this is hitting them. And we already saw the Wisconsin election results, Katie. That was not just about a judge, as good as she is, Judge Crawford. It was also about people's feelings about Elon Musk and the economy, particularly in rural areas where we saw a 20-point swing in many of the counties from where Donald Trump's numbers had been and where her numbers were in this election.
Yeah, Donald Trump has attributed his win in November to the price of groceries. He keeps talking about it. He's confusingly calling groceries an old-fashioned term, as if it's not a term that everybody uses every day. Maybe, I guess, he doesn't use it every day. Let me ask you about what's happening in Minnesota. And, you know, you're going to get hit pretty hard, or you already are. A lot of Fortune 500 companies are based in Minnesota. Target, Best Buy, General Mills. Best Buy gets about 55% of the products it sells from China and 20% from Mexico, according to an SEC filing. The retailers' stock was down almost 18% yesterday. That's a lot. Target was down nearly 11%. I could go on, not to mention all the farmers in Minnesota. How do you, as a Democratic senator in a Congress that is controlled by Republicans, try to help your constituents?
I've been calling this out for months, not just this week, predicting that this kind of collapse could happen. And sure enough, we're starting to see this biggest hit to the stock market in, well, what will end up being in my lifetime for sure. And the problem is, when you listed those companies, you know what I thought of? I didn't think of their bottom lines as much as I thought of the people I know that work there. I thought of those people that work in the checkout aisles. I thought of the farmers who I saw on a 14-county tour I took in Minnesota who have small farms. Those people are going to be hit right away, Katie. Some of the big companies can handle this for a while, but the workers who may lose their jobs or the farmers who just barely make it and are already having so many headwinds at them with avian flu and input costs and weather events, this is the thing that could put them over. So he is messing around with people's lives. This is not just, well, he's out golfing. This is their entire life, their hard-earned savings. Seniors who are looking at their 401ks or their Social Security numbers and thinking, I'm not going to be able to make it. I worked my whole life. He had better look at this, and he better reverse course, and he better get back on track.
He is golfing today. I have one more question for you, and I'm running out of time. The administration has called this a national emergency, that we need to rehome, make more things here. It's a national security issue as well. Is there any merit to that argument?
Look at what they use. They said any country that we have a trade deficit with, that was a national emergency. Then he's going to slap them with 10 or maybe 20 or 40% tariffs. Completely not how. So I don't see that. What I see is you negotiate trade agreements like the USMCA. It's coming up again. That's with Canada and Mexico, right? That's where he should do it. He was proud of that trade agreement when he passed it. And that's how you do things with especially your friends and your allies. What I'm afraid of, Katie, it's not just manufacturing and farming. People are canceling trips to America. 70% of Canadians down canceling trips. that will have a whole nother impact on restaurants and cafes, because people who visit from other countries spend an average of $5,000 when they're here. It'll affect retail, everything. So everyone, I'm very glad that some Republicans are standing up, but not enough are. They are not subjects to a king. This is their big test case tonight with this amendment, and it's going to be their big test in the next few days.
Senator Amy Klobuchar, thank you very much for joining us.
It's great to be on.
Emily Lay joins me now, along with John Vecchione, Senior Litigation Counsel at the New Civil Liberties Alliance, which is the group representing her. Good to have both of you here. Emily, I'm sorry it's under these circumstances. Tell us about your business and the impact these tariffs will have on it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having us. I think that this is such an important conversation to be having. Our business, I founded it in 2008. We make beautiful planners and paper goods for busy women. They're carried in major retail stores and also on our website. And we've been paying tariffs since 2017. I employ 8 additional women who are all Americans. We've paid nearly $1.2 million since 2017, and we are looking at anywhere between 54% and 79% tariffs as of lately.
And can I just say, you also give back, right?
Yes, absolutely. The philanthropic arm of what we do is so very important. And unfortunately, tariffs like this cut into every piece of our business, from salaries to growth opportunities to philanthropic efforts as well. It's truly devastating what's happening.
So, John, what is your legal strategy here? What's your case?
Well, first, it's a civil case, not a criminal case. I do want to make that clear. But look, the president has, in putting in the China, Mexico, and Canadian sanctions against Americans who import from those countries, used a statute that it's called IEEPA, and it doesn't allow tariffs. So the first thing is the law they've cited doesn't let them put in tariffs. It lets them put in, for instance, embargoes, stuff like that. The second matter is this so affects the economy that under the major questions doctrine that the Supreme Court has put in when it interprets statutes, it says, look, if you're going to affect the economy in some major way, it better be clear that Congress gave you this power. And under that doctrine, the government certainly can't show that this statute was clearly giving them this power. And then if it did give them this power, Congress gave no indication of how it should be exercised. And that impacts the non-delegation doctrine, which is, look, tariffs are congressional power. It's in Article 1 of the Constitution. So if they want to give any of it to the president, they have to tell him how to use it. And the way this has been implemented, Congress has given them no indication of that. So I think those are the major reasons why this is going to fall. And that is, in a nutshell, our case.
So, Emily, I'm very curious about what pushed you to take this step, put your company out there and become the first to sue the administration over these tariffs.
The work we do matters. And I think in a lot of ways, we're hearing about the macro effects of tariffs and a trade war. But I employ 9 women, American women. Many of them are mothers. These tariffs are impacting people on a very human level. We have women who are worried about their jobs. We have customers concerned they're not going to be able to get the products they've known and loved for 16 years. I'm answering big questions from kids about people's jobs that are at risk. It's truly gone from something scary since 2017 to something that felt impossible and now feels absolutely devastating.
We also know that small business is the driver of the U.S. economy. So I am curious what you've heard from other business owners that you're in touch with about these tariffs. And tell us as well more about anything you've heard from your customers.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. I think it's important to say, and I'm glad you acknowledge this, it is a scary thing to take this risk and to put ourselves out there and be the first. But I hope that what we're doing serves as an example, and it invites other businesses to come out and explain how these tariffs are hurting them and how they're hurting at a very deeply personal level. Yes, I have talked to many, many small businesses, and Americans who are importing from overseas, but also companies that are American made but are sourcing raw materials from overseas. They're going to be impacted. It's also very scary to be here now and have to start trying to plan for what we're going to do when these things are constantly changing and being backtracked. And as an entrepreneur, as a creative, it devastates me, and it feels catastrophic to have to look at the future of my American dream, of the American dreams of so many people, and feel like this is where it ends.
Emily Lay, John Vecchione, we will check back in with you and see how and where this goes. Thank you for taking the time to talk with us. We appreciate it.